Thank you. Thank you. The pleasure is mine. What a great conversation. This is something that we need to discuss because, there's a ton of things that could be said that are after effects, right? That can affect you personally, professionally. And of course, like your mind is a reflection of you. And sometimes we got to declutter it. We got to talk about the right things, right? To move forward, to be our best selves. So thank you so much, Jared. I'm so happy to talk to you about this important topic. Let's go ahead and dive a little bit in. Tell me in your own words about yourself, about your background, and about the research that you're conducting that is so important and relevant to this topic.
Thank you, Virginia. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. It's honestly a blur. So I've been really fortunate that for the last few years, I have been stationed at RAF Milton Hall. So gotten to experience all of the joys that come with Europe and really had a chance to get a foothold in that community. So with that foothold, have come to realize a lot of the issues that comes with transitioning gracefully in what is a forever chaotic world as a military spouse. And while I say military spouse, this isn't limited to military spouses. It's definitely active duty. It's definitely veterans. It's definitely GS employees, everybody in between at the kind of whim of the government moves and kind of getting their foothold every time something gets uprooted.
Yep, and I think that you're right. It's anyone that is involved in the circle of this uproot. I think we all it takes a village, right? Everyone gets involved and it gets affected at some point in a certain manner. So it's really interesting. Let's go ahead and take a little bit of a deeper dive here. Super curious, I have a ton of things to ask. Can you outline the areas of life that have to be rebuilt after a move and why doing so can be so hard, so difficult, and so draining in some of us?
That's a great question. It's a good place to start. So areas to outline, you've got your obvious ones, and then you've got some not so obvious ones. The obvious ones I have found are easier to plan for, and it's the not so obvious ones that kind of sneak up on us. So things that you have to rebuild after every move. You have to learn your new base, where your resources are. You have to get your kids into school. You have to get yourself settled into a new school, to a new job, to a new community, and ultimately learn the geography of that area. The not so obvious ones are obviously more subtle, and those are the ones that require a lot more attention. That's where I see a lot of people struggle. So with every move, we see adaptation required to join a new social circle. There's new commodities to be had. There's a new culture, and that's not even international versus national. Every state, every location is going to have its own culture. Political climate, that's something we're seeing even with today. That's going to be new wherever you go. So all of these things that are just as important as the obvious areas of acclimation, but we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, we don't talk about them. And I think that there's also something to be said. It's like there's so many subsets of people around us, and there's things that we can say and we can translate over to other communities, but there's some communities that we cannot say certain things on. And I think that it's so important to just be able to always realize of how taxing the effects can be of changing what you will talk about, how you're going to interact. It could be a block away, but it's always going to be different. And doing that every so often definitely is bound to cause some effects. How can a military family maintain reasonable expectations about the timeline of adjusting to a new place while still being optimistic about that new place and having a positive outcome upon receiving this new chapter in their lives?
Yes. So this question always kind of makes me laugh, and I hear it a lot because I think traditionally military spouses have been told to embrace the suck, right? It's going to be bad. You just got to get through the bad. And I don't know about you or anybody else listening, but I don't know how helpful that's been to you. It's certainly not been helpful to me. I do want to start with a story. I have a friend, Megan, whom I met within my first 1 or 2 days at our current base. And she pretty much told me upon first meeting me that it'll take me about 6 months to acclimate to my new base. And I was like, that's pish posh. I am Judith Lord and I'm resilient. And sure as can be, Megan was right. It took me about 6 months to find my footing. And the important thing to remember here, though, is that 6 months was my normal. Yours could be 2 months. Yours could be a year. And everything in between that and above that and beyond that is normal because each of these experiences are individualized. So I think prescribing to a hard and fast timeline, when you go into it with this ideology like I had, where it's, I'm resilient, I'm going to be fine, I'm going to get on my feet, that's when we start to see that disruption. That's when we start to see a difficulty with transition. This is not embrace the suck, but this is being open to experiences that are going to be very new along the way and kind of incorporating them into our new lives.
Yeah, and you said it best. I mean, no matter how long it takes, it's still impactful, but we have to be respectful of everyone's timeline because all of us are built differently and we're our unique selves based on a frame of reference, right? So, I mean, some things will impact us more than others. Some things will take a little longer more than others. And it's all about being kind and patient with one another. That's the true positivity and value of a community thriving, right? That is super interesting. Thank you. Tell me a little bit more about, the after effects, right? We're going to talk about anxiety, depression, any affection that we might feel from these changes. That is completely valid, by the way. What are some ways in a person preparing for a move or adjusting to a new place can soothe these things? Like, how can someone bring that little emotional toolkit prior, during, and after?
So preparing for a new move, the way I see it is twofold. You have your practical ways, and then you have ways that you can utilize to increase your psychological flexibility. And that's where we start to build on the principles of acceptance and commitment therapy. So I'll start with some practical ways. I don't know many military spouses that don't have some element of type A in them. And I know that the majority of us, before we get to a new base, we research our communities that we're going to live in. We research the schools that our children are going to go to, what public transportation looks like, what restaurants are available, and kind of get our foothold in that community before ever actually being there. One of the great things about the internet, social media, is that oftentimes we can really scope out a place before ever actually setting foot there. And that's incredible. That's not a luxury that we've seen really beyond these last 10 years. We've really seen this boom. So that's a huge, huge benefit for a lot of people to be able to get their foot in the door without actually being at that door yet. Now, the other side of that coin is the psychological flexibility. And this is what I don't think gets talked about enough. When we look at acceptance and commitment therapy, there are 6 elements, but given that we only have about 30 minutes, I really want to focus on the values element. So each person has different values. Each person has things that, if we quote Marie Kondo, brings us joy, brings us satisfaction, fills our cup, so to speak. And with these elements of satisfaction, that's where we can start to derive what is going to bring us peacefully into our new community. So I give the example of myself. Whenever I get to a new base, my first goal is to get a job. I just need a job. I need to do something, get out of the house. And that in and of itself is a goal. Now, the difficulty in distinguishing a goal versus a value is that there is a lot of overlap. But the difference is that a value is never, it's not finite. It's not achieved. You don't get satisfaction and then you're done with satisfaction. A goal is, okay, I've got a job. What next? Or I didn't get a job, so now I'm a failure. So it's important that when we start to do this transition, we focus on the values associated with our goals. Now, going back to the example, I need a job. Every time I get to a new base, this is my greatest stress. I don't actually need a job. What I need is an opportunity to contribute to my field, an opportunity to provide for my family, to meet new people, to be mentally stimulated throughout the day. Those are the values that I'm actually looking for. So I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor by trade. If I got a job as a chemical engineer, it's a great job, right? But it's not going to bring me joy. It's not going to fill my cup in the way that working in my field would. So it's really important to identify the values associated with goals rather than just focusing on those goals.
Right. I think that you said it best, and I truly resonated with understanding the difference between values and goals. And goals tend to be a little finicky, where they're finite, where there's like a degree of like self-judgment that we all tend to do because our brains are, genetically predisposed to negativity and bias. And I think that focusing on a roadmap that is based on values and satisfaction, like gains, right? Like if you're working out and the gains that you want to have, that would be definitely ultimately the better for us, especially for those folks that are of support of the person that is getting deployed. And I think that you touch base on, defining what we need specifically as we build this roadmap. And that is part of building that, kind of like emotional welfare toolkit that we're talking about when it comes to deploying, when it comes to prepping for this important new chapter. How can military families begin building community and new friendships after a move? You talked about this with, the research and that resilience and that, that deployment that wives do that is incredible. But let's talk about the things that can be beneath the surface, that like that those tips, those those tips and tricks that are true that you probably have done a ton of times when it comes to doing these friendships, moves, looking for employment, even connecting with other moms in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get on that, I really want to, you brought up something that I think is really important, a foot stomp. I keep saying PCS, I keep saying move, but in reality, we have so much transition, so much chaos in our day-to-day life. So while I'm saying move, you might hear my spouse is deploying for 6 months and I don't know how to navigate this, or my kid just went to college and this empty nest is really empty. So all of these principles are designed to help you transition through any chaos that you may experience. With that, and again, focusing on PCS, but not limiting it to such, there are, there's two elements here. There's building community and friendships, and there's looking for employment. And what I have experienced with most people seeking help through this transition is that they are either looking to satisfy one or both. Now, the easier one, in my opinion, is the looking for employment element. And I say easy almost tongue in cheek because it's not easy at all, but it has a very actualized goal. You have employment or you don't. Or if you have employment, you're seeking better employment or you don't. And those are really important quantifiers that I think a lot of people add value to. So not values in and of themselves, but valuable to some. One of the interesting things that I have seen recently, it came out of a study from LinkedIn, and LinkedIn determined that 85% of all employment opportunities are actually acquired through networking specifically through secondary and tertiary sources. So this kind of nips in the bud this idea of close circle nepotism that we have all hung our hats on for way too long. This is no longer my best friend got me a job. This is I went to a conference and met somebody who works at a clinic who got me an interview, which means the silver lining in all of this is that every opportunity you have to network is a step in the right direction towards employment. And your opportunities for networking are infinite. Now, they don't always seem infinite, right? So let's not get hung up on that. Opportunities for networking can occur anywhere. You're standing in line in a grocery store, you strike up a conversation, you leave some business cards at a coffee shop. The problem are not the networking opportunities, it's how to capitalize on these networking opportunities. So you're talking to somebody in a grocery store line, and if your value is to contribute to your field, that's the opportunity to say, yep, we just got here, and I'm looking for my new role as a counselor. 90% of the time, this person might be like, yeah, good luck. That sounds great. Wish you the best. But that 10% of the time, 5% of the time, or as per LinkedIn, 85% of the time, that a new job is acquired, it's going to be through this secondary and tertiary connection where that person in the grocery store line says, actually, the hospital's hiring. Here's the hiring manager's info. Good luck. And that is a step in the door. So that's why I say employment is a little bit easier to manage. And again, not minimizing that it's still difficult, but a little bit easier. The other side of that is building community and new friendships. And I'll be the first to profess that I'm a social butterfly. I love meeting new people. I love going out there, just engaging with everybody, but it's hard. And that's not something to be minimized either. I bring this point again back to values, because I think a lot of people get in their heads that when they move to a new base, when they find themselves suddenly single with somebody deploying, they have to make as many friends as possible because they have to stay busy and they have to get out of the house and they have to, have all these opportunities and it's going to be great. But that doesn't bring value to everybody. I had a conversation recently with a friend who was expressing some frustration in the fact that she moved here about a year ago. She had met so many new people through volunteer opportunities. And she kind of had this realization moment where the people she met was great, but she missed her friends back home. And rather than investing any more time in meeting new people, she was going to invest in strengthening these long distance relationships. Now, for someone like me, I was like, probably both, right? Both is good, but that's not my value. And that comes back to the individualized approach for all of these value-laden decisions. So factually, if you wanted to build your community and make new friends, if that brings value to you, the places, that you're going to go are your church, your school, your kids' school, in places of employment, volunteer opportunities. Most bases have infinite number of volunteer opportunities. There's even apps to make friends at this point. There are opportunities out there, but it's important to recognize that these community and friendship building opportunities may not match with your values. And if that's the case, that's okay too.
Yeah, and I think that resonates, right, with a lot of us. That not a lot of us are full extroverts. There's an introvert, extrovert, and then there's those who, we all, as millennials especially, right, there's that FOMO, like everyone is doing this, so I should be doing that. And it's not true. I think that what you said that is super impactful, and if anyone takes away from this conversation today, is every decision that we make should be value-based. That's the ultimate satisfaction. And that's truly aligned with our goals, and is a truly genuine self-soothing effect as well. So there's that driving aspect that we should exploit and stay constantly true to. For example, when we talk about all these 85% of employment opportunities acquired to networking, we spoke about this earlier within our panel. It's like, we got to capitalize on these conversations. There's tons of people out there who are willing to help one another, who are willing to build community on LinkedIn or other groups like Power to Fly. And the community is there, right? Don't be shy. The worst that can happen is that someone didn't respond, or that you just had a conversation that was passerby, right? Even could be it in a chat room or be it at the supermarket, like you say. I think that, the military community is definitely strong. I think that they're definitely that be there for you, been there, done that, I'm here to support you. So there's definitely that value. And it's something that people shouldn't be afraid of reaching out. And you said, there's even the apps, which you can be the comfort of your own home and trying to research and get out there. So thanks for sharing those tips. And I think that's definitely valuable. Can you tell us about the role that personal or family values play in transitioning to a new location? So we're going to talk a little bit more about, we talked about value-informed decisions, but let's talk about the ones that you do on behalf of your family, or you do alongside with your family, which is everyone's little contributions to this nucleus. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I think, and again, it's an individualized approach, right? But I think for many people, this is arguably one of the most difficult yet important areas to overcome when we transition to a new environment. So I'll use a stereotype that I've seen pop up in my community, where you have a spouse that stays at home and they don't see their partner because they work for 48 hours a day. And then when they come home, they're tired and need to relax, right? It's a trope that we've all heard time and time again. What I would suggest to individuals in this situation is to go back to those values. 5 Love Language, I think, is a really great resource for military spouses to kind of look at, to help them identify what is important in a relationship, what is important in a family. So is it the fact that you're not getting that quality time? Is it the fact that you're not getting words of affirmation or physical touch, so on and so forth. And I think by identifying that, we start to see where the deficits lie. My partner and I are both very busy. He's got a really intense career and I work 4 jobs. So between the two of us, we don't have a lot of free time. One of the things that we determined kind of early on is that, all right, during the weeks, it is near impossible to see each other. It's very difficult. We try to have dinner together. That doesn't always work. But what we've done is to carve out weekends. And we don't always do something on the weekends, but we've committed to weekend activities with each other to make sure that we still have that quality time. Again, that's an individualized approach. That doesn't work for everybody. What values might look like for you if you're not working a traditional job is that you have a clean house, and that's how you show love, but that's also how you receive that personal comfort. Or maybe if you are working full time, maybe it's your partner makes you a cup of coffee in the morning, right? Not a big thing, but it's that little value added to your day. And with that, it's hard to say specifically what personal and family values contribute to an easier transition, but recognizing them makes it a lot easier to incorporate them to that transition.
And I think you couldn't have said it any better. Like, we definitely, it's about understanding, understanding each other's needs, evaluating what we're missing to satisfy these deficits in a clear manner and with our best in mind, right? I mean, what you said about the weekends may not work for a family that has 4 children, but it might work for a couple that is family planning, right? It's super important to have the together time. Or, it could be for someone where, your kids are already out to college and you're, you're still in that grind of the deployments in the military, reconnecting with each other, right? That emptiness dating, if you will, that people face sometimes. I want to ask you a bonus question.
Of course, please.
Yeah, no, I'm super interested about, the principles of acceptance and commitment therapy. Like, can you just talk a little bit more about what that means? Because I think that that's super important. Acceptance and commitment are things that we always say in our vows when we're with someone as a spouse. But what does that mean in your words, and how can we apply that with this typical relationship that is of being a military spouse?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm excited for this question, but I'm bummed we only have a few more minutes together because this could be my soapbox forever and ever. So acceptance and commitment therapy is kind of this beautiful brainchild of psychotherapy meets clinical behavior analysis. It's empirically based, and it uses essentially acceptance of a current situation and mindfulness strategies along with behavior change strategies to increase that psychological flexibility. So it goes beyond the trope of embrace the suck, and more so, what can I change? What can I not? And then how do I change what I have control over? So there's 6 essential components of acceptance and commitment therapy. There's contact with the present moment, values, which we've discussed in depth, committed action, self as context, diffusion and acceptance. These are typically presented on a hexaflex, which when I first got into this field, I had to go back and Google what a hexaflex is. So no shame if you're doing that now. But essentially, each of these builds an element of that hexaflex. The idea being at any given point, you can be working on one of these 6 elements, but you do not have to master any of them or all of them. It kind of ebbs and flows based on what you need in any given moment. So, like I said, we started on values, but contact with the present moment is really enhancing that connection to the present moment through mindfulness. It's something that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of us, as I mentioned, are planners, right? You want to know what you're doing tomorrow, next week, next year, 10 years, and that's not always possible. So what we try to do is come back to the present. So contact with that present moment is really important. Committed action really builds on the values-driven life goals. So using those mindfulness skills, we start to teach people how to take action based on those values. So it can look like short-term, long-term, medium term, whatever goes anywhere in your behavioral plan, but with that committed action to act upon those value life goals. From there, we have self as context. Now, I think that self as context is probably one of the more difficult ones to manage. It's basically what we can call the observing self. So when life gets chaotic, right? When we start to feel like the world is spinning all around us, it's important to step back and think of what roles we play in this chaotic life, with the recognition that if any of those roles ceases to be, or if we add roles onto that, it doesn't take away from who we are as a person. This one requires a lot of practice. I mentioned that I'm always on the hunt for my next big employment when we get to a new base. And sometimes what that looks like is I feel like a failure if I can't get a job, when in reality, being employed is just an element of who I am. It is not who I am. So that one, personal disclosure, I'm still working on. We also have diffusion. So that's really identifying those negative thoughts and engaging what we call comprehensive distancing. So I'm not a bad person. I did a bad thing. That's the easiest example that I can provide here. And then finally, acceptance. Now, acceptance is, again, difficult for a lot of people because it really banks on the ideology that sometimes you can't change things. Sometimes you have to embrace the suck. But what can you do to make it better? So if my spouse is deploying and that's really difficult on me, maybe what makes it better in that moment is to eat a ton of Chinese food. It's not a long-term solution, but it makes it better in that moment. Long-term, though, I can't make his deployment go by any faster. What I can do is I can throw myself into my community. I can work hard, I can study hard, and I can continue to build upon myself while he's gone, so his absence isn't as painful. But again, different strokes, different folks. It's an entirely individualized approach.
I love what you said, and I think that maybe that hexagon philosophy, that you described, should be something that is in the constant front of mind for us, because sometimes we need that visual reinforcement that everything will be okay, right? The most vulnerable act of human being can experience is this acceptance, and that's so powerful, and it's so scary, and it's just like being like naked in front of a mirror and just seeing your good, your ugly, everything. It's just you.
Yep.
And I think that that's so powerful, and I really appreciate you sharing that. For all those in the audience, can you tell us where we can find more information, or you, if we want to reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will make sure that all of my contact information is available for anybody who would like it. If you would like a deep dive into acceptance and commitment therapy, Dr. Stephen Hayes is at the forefront of this research. He offers several opportunities to learn more, but if you just wanted to do a good Google search, a lot of people have taken up this research. One of the things that I love most about acceptance and commitment therapy, that will be my final mic drop, it's not just for you. Once you get to the point that you can start to recognize yourself as context, you can accept what you can change, focus on what you can't, start to diffuse some of those negative thoughts, we start to extend it to other people. And by doing that, we start to make this world a little bit kinder, a little bit gentler, and a little bit more accepting.
Thanks for that. That's powerful, and that's true. If we walk around with a fulfilled cup, with a peaceful, mindful relationship with ourselves, it will be notorious for others, and others are going to want to be able to get a little bit of it. And it's a gift that keeps on giving. That's kindness, right? One positive act, creating a contagion of a next positive act that creates a movement of community that stands together, that supports one another, that irradiates positivity, but also that understands there's negative things in the world, and we embrace that. We support one another, and we are there for one another. So thank you so much for this conversation. I hope that everyone in the audience enjoyed it as much as me. And I hope that more people get to watch this, share it, contact you, read it, and pass it along. So having said this, Hunter, the floor is yours. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for having me. And thank you for moderating. Appreciate it.